They wanted us to design and build this new airplane from scratch in less than 2 years. And we all show up the first week of January. I said, but here's what we've been asked to do. We've been asked to get this built and flying in 24 months. And there's like this collective gasp in the room. And you have 16 yeah buts in your book. I think I heard about 32 of them that day from the 12 people that were in that room.
Welcome to the Yeah But podcast. I'm Marc, Wolfe, executive coach and author of the best-selling book Yeah But. If you've ever said yeah but when facing a challenge, this show is for you. Join me and inspiring guests from Super Bowl champs to Navy SEALs and human rights leaders as we share real stories of overcoming excuses and getting unstuck. Let's cut through the noise and lead better together.
I want to introduce you to our audience by you telling them two things about you personally, two things professionally, and why it matters.
Yeah, well, Marc, first off, thank you for having me here today. I loved it, loved the book, and I'm looking forward to having the conversation about it. But two things about myself. Well, I'm a proud father and husband. At home, I have a 12-year-old son right now, and trying to inspire him as he goes through his all the challenges of growing up. I grew up in Nebraska, and I grew up loving aviation. I remember going to air shows with my dad and with my mom, and watching the moon landings and watching Space Lab, Skylab, and so being able to see all of these things growing up. That's really, people encouraged me to become an engineer, and so that's really what has helped shape my career. As I started out as an engineer, just designing rocket parts. Two things about my career. Well, first is, I have been a builder of dynamic teams to really take on these impossible projects. And I've led aircraft development programs in really record-breaking time. I've led a team when I was working for Richard Branson and Virgin Galactic, and led the team to get the spaceships up to space. And so people look at this stuff and they're like, well, that's not possible. And so I've been able to work with these great teams to do these things. And now I've moved into a little different role, and I work with kind of more futuristic, more visionary roles, and helping companies find ways to overcome some of their challenges using digital solutions, and really using AI and the digital twin and just digital technology to really help their businesses run faster. So why does this matter to your audience? Well, I think the big thing I always tell people is, it's not impossible. There's these tasks, they look hard, and there are ways to overcome the yeah buts, and there's ways to overcome the challenges that people have in front of them. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about something at work or something, part of a church group or a community group. Many of these things, they all apply in how you get these things done.
Well, it's interesting that you would have yeah buts as a guy who's actually put things into orbit and created something from a white blank page and helped teams actually envelop and do it. And you have yeah buts, really?
It's hard to believe. And
if I interviewed either one of our wives, they would say, "Oh, the list is long." But let's just narrow them down to a few that you think.
I don't know. You have 16 in your book, and I might have all of them, but.
So pick one of the yeah buts that you're like, you know what, this is a yeah but, and this is what I'm working through or have worked through.
Well, I think one of the biggest yeah buts that really just jumped out at me was like, what if I fail? As I think about my own personal life and my career, it's just, that's always kind of, when you're taking on these high-risk programs, one of the questions is always going to be, what if you fail? And if you don't have that, you're probably a little crazy. And so a great example of that was when I was leading the Scorpion program. I was working at Cessna Aircraft Company, and they asked me to take on this program where we're going to design a new tactical fighter aircraft, try to open up a new market, try to develop new ways of designing and building the aircraft, and to do it in record time and be a bit of an incubator for the company to go fast. And so they asked me to take on this program and they wanted us to design and build this new airplane from scratch in less than 2 years.
Well, hold on.
Yeah.
Most people know Cessna not for building that kind of airplane. So let's go back. What's Cessna you known for? And now what were you building?
Well, so Cessna known for a lot of smaller single-engine aircraft, like a Cessna 172, which with a pilot for a couple people in it. That's what I learned to fly in.
Okay, that's what
And,
most people,
yeah,
if they even know about a Cessna,
they
they're
think
like,
about that. Yeah.
okay, and they think about that. But you're talking about something completely different.
Completely different. So Cessna does also do a lot of business jets, and so we worked on a lot of different. Throughout my career at Cessna, I worked on a lot of different business jets, and actually Cessna did have a little bit of a history with with what was an airplane called the Tweety Bird, which is a trainer that was built in the I don't know 1960s or so, where they had delivered those to various air forces around the world. So they had a little bit of a history with some defense or military aircraft, but this was really a new endeavor for Cessna. It was out there, and a lot of people were like, "You're crazy for doing that."
So they put you in charge of coming up with something that they've never done before, and you had to build a team and bring everyone together, and it was either you failed and missed the deadline or it succeeded. There was no middle ground, was there?
No, there was no gray area. I mean, I had taken on a lot of crazy projects in the past, and you could always kind of say, well, okay, well, failure is not that, you can overcome that failure.
You get partial credit? Is that what you're saying?
You could get partial credit. This was like a 1 or a 0. You're going to do it or you're not going to do it. And so I was the first guy. They hired me, and then I had to bring on 12 people that were going to be my supervisor, my management team as part of that project. I couldn't tell them what they were going to work on. And so I had to come like, hey, Marc, I got a great program for you. You're going to really work hard. You're going to have a lot of fun. It's a really cool program, but I can't tell you what it is. Are you in or are you out?
Wow.
And
so people had to be just as crazy as you in a way.
A little bit, but I think also they had to trust me that I wasn't going to lead them astray, and I was going to show them a good time.
But these weren't all these 12 people weren't people you knew.
I knew most of them.
Okay. So you build trust.
Yeah.
Which is kind of pivotal in any relationship, isn't it?
It's critical. You can't do that kind of a program without trust. You can't have any relationship working with other people. Don't care what you're doing. You have to be able to trust those people you work with. I mean, those relationships are the foundation of everything. I think every good business outcome.
So people trusted you. You got them on the team. You couldn't tell them what it was. They said yes. And then they had to actually go, and when they found out, what did you guys all think when you finally did the big reveal?
So it was kind of funny. So I recruited everybody in December. And then we went on Christmas break.
Okay.
They still didn't know what they were going to be doing. And we all show up the first week of January, and we have our kickoff meeting, and there's 12 of us in this conference room. And I show that we do our introductions because not everybody knew each other yet. And we do our introductions, and then I say, okay, well, here's what we're going to be working on. And I put a picture of the sketch of the airplane that we had. And everybody's like, whoa, this is so cool. We can't wait. This is great. And then I said, but here's what we've been asked to do. We've been asked to get this built and flying in 24 months. And there's like this collective gasp in the room. And you have 16 yeah buts in your chat in your book. I think I heard about 32 of them that day from the 12 people that were in that room. And so it was just like, and for them, everything. It was, what if we fail? What if we don't have time? How do we do this? Where do we start? I mean, you can just, I had my own yeah buts with the what if you fail? But I know the rest of the team, they had a lot of yeah buts, and they culminated in what if I fail? And so it was kind of.
These were engineers, and these are people that have done successful projects before, and they still were concerned about the timeline, about how to do it, and about it being new.
Yeah, well, typically this would be the kind of project that would take 5 or 6 years. And so we're being asked to do it in less than 2 years. And so that's obviously, that would be the reason, like, we don't know. We don't know if this can be done. This is impossible. We literally, later on, once we had the project going, we interviewed people and we laid out our timeline and our program. And we asked one guy, he's a well-respected program manager, and we said, well, what do you think? And he looks at it, and he shakes his head, and he goes, I think you're crazy.
So let's not leave the listeners hanging. How did it turn out?
It turned out really good. So that first day was, it set the tone for everything. And we went through, and first off, we had to kind of just reframe the whole problem. Like, what does success actually look like? Because most of the time the team was looking at it based on what they had done previously in their career, and so we put a very clear path of what does success look like. We get a demonstrator that's flying in this period of time, in less than 2 years, and then we have it ready to keep flying. And that was kind of important because we didn't want to just be one and done. We were trying to build a business, and so we really set the scope. After that, then we spent probably the next 3 or 4 hours, and I was like, hey, what do you guys think can be done to go faster? And every one of them provided input into that process. And at the end, we were able to look at this and say, this is a plan we can live with. So we started out, we just built that plan. Once we understood what the scope of the program was going to be, we built that plan, and then we were able to execute for that plan. And we got it done. And I'll tell you the punchline, we got it done. We were flying in 23 months. And
a month early.
It was great.
So you did the impossible, and you did it earlier than it was possible.
Yeah.
And wow. So that's a great kickoff. Okay, so that's a yeah, but, and other people's yeah, buts in it. What other yeah, but?
Yeah, I think another one that I've struggled with a lot has been, where do I start? Yeah, but where do I start? And for me, when I'm in an unknown situation, it leads me to the other yeah buts of what do I fail. But when I'm in those situations, the tendency is to overthink it.
An engineer overthinking things?
It's hard to believe. It's never happened. It's a first for me, but it is a characteristic. But there's a tendency to be to really overthink it. And so an example of that is, I went to, after I'd been at Cessna and I'd led the Scorpion team on its successful first flight, and we had a lot of successes after that for the next couple of years. Then I had an opportunity to go to the Spaceship Company, which is part of Virgin Galactic with Richard Branson's team developing space tourism.
So hold on, you're going to go work, after working with Cessna, you're going to go work with a billionaire who wants to go and literally commercialize, make it public, to go and do spaceships.
Well, I wanted to do something that seemed kind of fun.
So what?
Wasn't challenged enough by the last thing.
Okay, so working with Richard Branson at any level must be interesting by itself, but now you're working on something that is so publicly visible that he does not want to fail.
Right.
So now that you got this, okay, tell me more about where do I start? Okay,
so where do I start? So the challenge for me is that when I took the role on, I was going to be taking over an existing engineering team, and they wanted me to replace the previous chief engineer for the role. And so they were bringing me as the vice president of engineering. And so every time I had moved into a new role, it was usually either as an individual contributor into a situation I pretty well knew, like on the Scorpion jet, where I could hire everybody and I knew my team. So I'm sitting there and as I'm, as they're interviewing me, you start to kind of get a sense that there's some challenges there with the team that they need to work through. And they had a good team, but they were wanting to have some changes and have them do better. And so so I didn't really know where to start, because it's like this was totally different than what I'd ever done. I didn't know anybody I didn't know anybody out there, and my experience had always been entering a new job in a much different way. And so I just kind of remember sitting there thinking like, okay, now really what I accepted the job. Now what did I get myself into?
Yeah, and you had to move to go to.
Yeah, we did. So we were living in Wichita, Kansas, and moved out to the job was in Mojave, California, so at the edge of the Mojave Desert.
Yeah, so that's really a family-friendly desert, right? Like as long as you like dry and hot and away from the rest of the world.
Scorpions and rattlesnakes.
But not scorpions, the previous.
Not the previous scorpions.
Okay, this is actually ones that can sting you. Okay.
Yeah.
So a little change of venue as well.
Change.
Did that add to the
all of it? There's a lot of uncertainty. I'm picking the family up. I'm moving. Our son was 3 or 4 years old at the time, and he really didn't understand the change. I mean, so much so when we went back to
It's
Wichita.
not like Kansas anymore.
Not like Kansas anymore. But when we actually went back after a couple months, we had sold our house and we were going to move our house. We were going to pack the house up and get it moved out to California. And our son was, his first response was, "Mommy, are we home now?" And we're like, "Oh boy, yeah." So, so moving the house, new job, it was just.
But you're working with this new team. You got existing people, which a lot of leaders do. They don't always get to pick their team. Most of the time,
absolutely,
you're either fixing something that someone else,
yeah,
or you're going to go and get a team because not everything starts in the beginning. So how did that play out, and what was a result of that team?
Well, I remember that we went into this role and I had a 30, 60, 90-day plan, and spot on. I'm ready to go. And I get there and I start talking to the stakeholders, all the other leaders of the company, and I start talking to the engineering team. And I'm like, wow, this 30, 60, 90-day plan, it's got to be a lot faster than that. Maybe it's like the, 3-week, 6-week, 9-week plan or something, but it's got to be a lot faster than 30, 60, 90 days. And so, and we were right in the middle of getting ready to go fly. So it was going to be the first flight, like my second week into the job. And so the team is under this immense pressure. They've got to get everything done. And then here you got this new guy coming in. And so really it was...
change management sounds like fun there.
Change management, so getting in there, setting a vision. This is who I am, and trying to get from who is this guy to we can trust him to work with us and help us and support us in the conversations that we're having with management. I mean, I think as a leader, you got to build that trust right away. And so that was probably that was those first 2-3 weeks were just so critical in that event. And so I really I had to spend time getting to know the team, and then over the course of time, really looking at is everybody in the right place, and we made some changes to the leadership team and put people in a place to succeed. And I would say that team, really it became a very high performing team. The attrition rate was, we were losing, 19-20% of our engineering staff a year. We cut that down to about 7 or 8% the first year. And that stability then helped us really, perform. And 2 years later, we were able to get our first flight to space with that spaceship. And so with that team, and very emotional time, very great time for the team, great accomplishment.
So you've done some massively significant things. Not that other leaders haven't. I just think that, when you go to a cocktail party and people say, I landed on the moon, it's really hard to top that one. But now it's like, I got a rocket and I've been able to launch it, or I've been able to do this thing. So you have a third but even though?
Well, I have quite a long list, I'm sure. But another but that I've also felt, and this was a little bit earlier in my career, but I'm not ready. And in this situation, so as I mentioned, I'm a mechanical engineer. Well, I'm an engineer, but I'm a mechanical engineer by training. So, and I'd been working on aircraft structures and space rocket structures throughout my career. And when I first joined Cessna, they asked me to take over this team to lead the autopilot development. But then we were developing a new aircraft, and one of the biggest challenges with a lot of new aircraft is the software that goes into the airplane. And there's no shortage of examples where, like the F-35, where the software has been a problem and it's years behind. And so we were working with Honeywell, one of our suppliers, and they were having some challenges with their software. And the boss asked me, like, "Hey, can you go down to Honeywell and be our on-site representative?" And I said, "Yeah, but I'm not a software guy, right?" He goes, "Yeah, that's okay. Like, but I don't really know anything about avionics, right?" And he goes, "Yeah, that's okay." And so for me, it was, I think about the only thing I really knew how to do at the time was, I knew how to buy an airline ticket so I could fly down to, to Phoenix every week to go visit Honeywell, because my background was completely different than what the background.
So how did they pick you?
Well, I think that they might have recognized that I also was doing a pretty good job of building teams. And so
So it was a people thing.
it was a little bit of a people thing.
Okay.
And I love that. And so while I didn't know a lot about software, I did learn a lot about software over the next 2 years. But I didn't know a lot about software, but I did at least know what I got started on what I did know what to do, and that was how to build teams. And so we had a lot of friction in the team, and so I just started. I would sit in on the telecons. That was back in the day before Zoom calls, and I'd be on the Honeywell side of the phone call and just listening to the comments that were being made and watching the reactions. And so then I'd spend the next few hours talking to all the people on the phone call, like, okay, this is how we need to react and respond. This is how we build relationships, and just really getting the teams talking again was a really big part of my job. But it was a great learning experience. But as I said, it's mechanical guy going into the software world. It was a great opportunity to learn a lot of new things.
Hey there, it's time for a quick break. While we're diving into how to live, learn, and lead better, I wanted to let you in on something I'm really excited about. If you've ever found yourself stuck in the yeah but cycle, those moments where excuses get in your way of your potential, my new book, Yeah But, Cut Through the Noise to Live, Learn, and Lead Better, is for you. The book is packed with practical strategies, real stories, and actionable advice to help you stop making excuses and start making progress. Whether you're a leader, a learner, or just someone looking to cut through the noise, Yeah But has something for you. And here's the best part. For a limited time, you can grab a chapter for free. Just head over to my website at www.marcawolfe.com/book to get started. Readers have already said that the perspective and stories guided them to get unstuck and move forward. All right, let's get back to the show and dive into more ways to break through those yeah but moments.
So here's what I see through each one of these stories. I don't think you saw what other people saw in you, right? So here's somebody who said, hey, I think this guy can go and do something that's never been done in less than 2 years and build a team. Then somebody that was getting replaced at a different team was like, I think you could turn this team around. It sounds like you did. And then even when you didn't think you were ready, you actually were more ready. And even though you didn't know software, what lesson can you tell others about all the times when you sold yourself short, used yeah buts, and what you learned from that process?
Yeah. Well, I think you're right. I think sometimes it's easy for me to look at the technical part of the job and really not see the leadership part of the job and the people part of the job. And I would say that, that first example, that I'm not ready, was really early, a little bit earlier in my career. And then as I progressed through the career, then I had the Scorpion Jet, and then I had the Spaceship Company. And I do have to admit that by the time I got to the Spaceship Company, that I had started to see that in myself, that they're hiring me to be able to lead the team, not to be the technical expert. I didn't get hired because I knew how to build spaceships. I didn't. But I did know how to lead teams and bring them together in a way, and help drive that vision home. And so I think for me, it was, looking at that is, it just, you have to be, for me, it became being a little bit more self-aware and trying to be introspective. Like, what are they actually looking for here? Maybe, and it kind of ties in with the, like the time. I was thinking about this a while back, the other day, that, in terms of the best use of my prioritized time, that in some of those previous roles, I was thinking about the technical part of the job, not realizing what they valued was the leadership part of the job and the people part of the job. And so once I started to understand that, I started to turn around a little bit.
It's interesting that even an engineer who knows so much about technical things can be used in a people role, because you have to have both skills. Because there are engineers, or any occupation, where someone just does their role, but they're difficult to work with, don't really communicate, and the people that know how to do communication, feedback loops, understand what other people are saying. I mean, what I heard from the software time when you were Honeywell, and it's like, if you could just see what people were saying and how they reacted, but you had to physically go there
Right.
because that wasn't on Skype or Zoom back then.
Yeah.
Nothing's really changed with people, just the method that we communicate does. We still need to listen,
Yeah.
hear, know when to react, and know what to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's so true. I mean, as an engineer, you may be familiar with the old joke. How do you know when an engineer likes you? And it's when he's looking at your shoes instead of his own. And there unfortunately might be a little bit of truth to that joke because engineers tend to, there are a lot of engineers that are very analytical and they like to work individually. But it's kind of interesting that you talk about that because as one of the things that really has changed for me in how I hire people is, I don't look just at like how smart are they? Can they, are they the smartest guy in the room? But I do look at how do they, how are their leadership skills? Do they have soft skills? Now, maybe they don't want to be a leader, and I got it, but can they at least talk to each other? Because we do things in teams. We rarely get a chance to work alone. So we work together in teams. And so are you able to work in a team environment and collaborate and communicate with everybody else? And then the third thing I always look at for is culture fit. It's, one of the challenges that we had at Spaceship Company was we were hiring people from big companies that were full of processes, and we're a little startup. And they were looking, those engineers didn't last very long. And so, we had to really look for people that would fit. And so, so as you say, it's the technical piece is so critical and so important. But I think really the ability for people to just really talk and, go back to that what we talked about earlier, building relationships, building trust, so critical for the work to be done.
And that's the thing I think we can't say enough, no matter what occupation. Everyone has yeah buts. It's usually a people solution, right? Because it's usually
always.
it's a people problem and people blame the leader. But even as a contributor, you still have a responsibility to communicate what's going on. Like,
Right.
even though you're a leader, you have to hear from the team to understand what's going on. And it's amazing in my role as an executive coach and an advisor, people tell me things they won't tell the leader because they share in a way where they're like, I'm trusted because I'm not here to undermine. I'm here to make sure it gets communicated. And what I keep hearing is you are the one that was bridging the gap between leadership and your team and strategy. And you're not at either one of those companies now because you even moved on beyond that company.
Right.
So it seems like you always like a new challenge to be able to do new things. There's so much for other people to learn in that, to see themselves in that story, to be like, be hungry for learning and understand that you're going to fail forward.
Yeah, I think it's so important to have a growth mindset. I've always learned. Every stage of my career, I can think about something I've learned. And when I went to Honeywell, and I spent 2 years learning about software and how to develop software, and so now that's a skill set that now I have. And am I the guy that's going to write the code? Probably not. But as a leader, in a world where most everything is using software nowadays, it's kind of important to know and understand that process. And so, and then I move into the Spaceship Company, as I move into, once I've joined Siemens in a strategy role, I was able to leverage everything that I had been doing in the past and helping individual companies be successful or individual projects within those companies be successful. And now I'm able to work with a lot of companies in a way that can help them be successful. So I feel like in a strategy role and a business role that, we're able to actually help more companies be successful. And so I wouldn't be where I am today if I wasn't curious and willing to try new things. And quite frankly, take on a few risks and be willing to fail once in a while. You use the term fail forward. And I do think that when you look at it and you're willing to take a smart risk and really understand what are possible outcomes, that more often than not, you're going to be successful with a little bit of preparation and just being ready and building those relationships with people that can help you be successful.
When you read the book, and we only met recently, we don't really even known each other for a long time. There's 25 stories in there. Do you remember any of the stories in there that really resonated? Because you mentioned about BUMPed, which is best use of my prioritized time. I came up with that acronym, the 1440 formula, about our 1440 minutes. But other than the chapters with the yeah buts, there were some stories. Which ones stick out?
You know, I love the stories, and there was two that really stuck out with me. And I apologize, I don't remember exactly what chapters they were, but one was the Axl Rose story about the new album and how long it took. And they spent so much time trying to be perfect that they never got it done. And by the time they got it done, it was way too late. And so that, you know, translates to so many things that people do, and that even, you know, that I see happening a lot in the different environments that I worked over the years, is as people strive for that perfection, you know, it's hard to achieve. And sometimes the 80 or 90% solution is actually more effective than the perfect solution. And the other one that really struck me, just because I never was aware of it, was the Dyson story of how many times, like 5,000, over 5,000?
Yeah, he had 1,500. Yeah, he had
what perseverance.
Yes, he definitely had. And the interesting part about it is because when you're trying to strive, so here's the difference in those stories, right? Axl Rose trying to produce Chinese Democracy was the most expensive album of all time. Loses most of his band because of the long time it takes, and his fans were waiting for an album. You got Dyson, who continued to iterate and be able to do something, but there's a success story in that because but you still have to know when to let go. You still have to know what version 1 should be. You still have to know what an MVP, minimum viable product, and you know about that.
Absolutely.
You've lived through that, because if you haven't had an MVP, you couldn't have trialed and tested it. Because
well, the whole Scorpion jet was about an MVP. I mean, we that first demonstrator was, you know, how do we get to our first flight and demonstrate these things? We want to start flying. We want to show that the airplane can fly, and then we'll start adding more stuff. And you know, there was a tendency at the beginning of the program, because it's a tactical aircraft, well, we want to put a gun on it, and everyone wants to talk about the gun. Well, you forget that you need an airplane, and so we had to put a $5 fine on the gun. You can't talk about the gun, and it's going to be $5. But we developed that MVP, and then we were able to build on that. And then we were, you know, every 6 months we had another iteration. So again, you know, we're talking about this in the context of product development, but I would argue it's about just about anything. You know, there's you know, a new process in a church group, and people sit there and noodle on it and try to get it perfect. I'm like, no, just go do it. Go do something, you can fix it. You know, so.
It's intriguing. Is there, you know, as we kind of wrap this up, what is one of the things you want to leave people with so they can hear that different perspective? Yeah,
well, I think it's, you know, for me, it's always been about willing to try new things. It's, you know, be curious, and you know, you kind of face your fears. The yeah buts are I think are some just really a manifestation of what are you afraid of. And you know, certainly for me, I'm afraid of failing, and so it's, I think, you know, the best and the most rewarding times of my careers, of my life for that matter, have been when I've done something that felt a little bit uncomfortable, and as a result, you know, I think that it's really given me the opportunity to learn more about myself, and I've actually had a lot of fun on the way.
That's great. Thanks so much for being a guest. Thanks for sharing these amazing stories, and your journey's not over, so you even have more to tell.
I can't wait.
Thank you for listening to the Yeah But podcast. If today's episode provided valuable perspective on how to overcome the excuses that can hold you back, let us know in the comments. Remember, it's not about the yeah buts. It's about finding ways to live, learn, and lead better every day. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who could use a little kick to get past their yeah buts. And don't forget to follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And for even more tips, connect with me at marcawolfe.com/podcast or on LinkedIn. Until next time, keep challenging those excuses and keep moving forward.